Here we are working on an MO on 31. I'm going to be filling this today for our video. Here Sarah is starting with the wedge. She chose the white wedge because that'll give us a good contact, and she's putting that in with the cotton pliers with a sectional matrix as well. We want to make sure we get a good tight seal along the margin there so we don't have any gaps, and to prevent any excess as well. Also, make sure to burnish a contact. And here we're just checking to make sure we've got that as well, and starting to fill the prep. Here we're working in the proximal box. We want to work with the deepest part of the prep and making sure we're using pressure as we're putting that in, using the PKT3R to create that height and that width, and light curing that initial layer. Adding some more, trying to make it a class 1 first by filling in the mesial area and using the plastic instrument to push the composite material against that band. And now we're going against the cusp as well, so that way we won't have any sub areas. Now we're working from the mesiolingual to make sure we've got that nice contour, and working from the mesiobuccal as well. Here we want to remove any excess that we have, and you can use that just by gently going against the matrix and then removing the excess, always keeping the tip against the matrix and then going along the tooth. And now we're going to go ahead and finish the prep, and we're working in the distal area. And again, just going against the cusps, and then removing any excess along those, like the lingual groove here. Want to try to do as much carving of the anatomy before you have to pull out your high-speed handpiece. Now that we've light cured our last layer, make sure you also light cure from the lingual and the buccal as well, from all angles. And now we're removing that wedge, and we're going to move the sectional matrix against the distal of 30. And now we're checking with the Explorer to see if we have any areas of sub before we move on to the high speed to remove excess. And we left the sectional matrix on the mesial of 30 to help protect the tooth when we pull out the high-speed handpiece. So gliding along all the areas with the Explorer will ensure that we don't have any sub. Using a 2x2 with some alcohol just to get a good view of the restoration. Found a little bit of sub, so went ahead and filled that, and then again forming it to the tooth. Here we're working in the distal buccal area, and want to try to avoid having excess after filling for sub. So again, using the Explorer again to check for the sub areas before we pull out our high-speed handpiece. Doing a thorough job here is going to save you time later. So now we're pulling out the high-speed handpiece, starting with the football, and we're working to remove those excess areas that we found with our Explorer, working in the distal lingual area to start. And you want to use a nice light pressure with using the high-speed handpiece. That way you don't remove too much of the restoration or possibly damage the tooth structure that's existing. And now that we're satisfied with that, we're going to pull out our sanding disc and use the slow speed. And we're just working to get that MO area really flush, remove any excess that we had before. And there's a little bit more we wanted to go ahead and take off the mesiolingual. So we're just going to touch that up. You're going to want to go IP and be very careful not to get the distal lingual of 30 while you're standing there. And it's good to start, if you have a lot to remove, you can start with the more orange colored sanding disc and then move to lighter. We had quite a bit to remove, so that's why we're using the we were using more of an orange color sanding disc. Now we're using a lighter one, which is going to be more fine. And so we actually found some more excess to remove, so we went back to the football. So we went backwards here so we could touch that up more. We want to do all of this before we go on to polishing. So now we've got our greenie and we're just doing the polishing, the finishing touches. When you're using the greenie, if you do have a lot of green left, that's an indication you use the high-speed handpiece again to remove any excess. So we actually went back to the football to remove that excess. And when finishing your restoration, you're going to want to start with the greenie before you go to an orangey and then finishing with a whitey. Here we're using the greenie to get that smooth surface so we can have a nice finished restoration, using a 2x2 with some alcohol so we can get a good view of the restoration itself. And then here we're using the white polishing so we can go ahead and get a nice finish on that composite. We're pulling out the wedge, and now we're doing the finishing touches. So we're going to use the floss, and we're going to see if our contact is perfect or a little bit too tight. It's good to floss twice just to make sure you agree whether it is too tight or if it's shredding the thread. So here we're doing it twice just to double check. Contact was a little tight, but there wasn't any shredding of the floss. So here we're going to go ahead and just sand just a little bit, not obliterating our contact, but just making it a little bit less of a tight contact for us, so it's easier with the floss. Now we're using the articulating paper. We're starting with the red, and we're doing a tap-tap motion. And we're looking to see if there's any red on the restoration itself that we completed. And then, sorry, that was actually the blue. This is now the red. And with the red, we're doing a side-to-side motion. Again, just seeing if there's any of the red that's on the actual restoration itself that we completed. And we didn't have any blue or red on the restoration itself, so that is perfect. And now we're just doing the final review, seeing if we're happy with the restoration, if it's matches the tooth anatomy, and if it's going to be good for their overall oral health. And we're looking from just all sides when you're done is helpful.